HarperCollins presents Over the Sea to Skye, a Skye Sisters Trilogy, Book 3, by Sue Moorcroft, read by Helen McAlpine. Chapter 1. As Valentina sat with her son Barnaby at Inverness Station on the brightly painted train bound for Isle of Skye, she reflected, fancifully, that if deception could derail lives, she and Barnaby had been left behind like wrecked carriages beside the track. Meanwhile, Train Gary had steamed off with new model Minerva, until recently Valentina's personal assistant. And they'd met, through her of course, at a bash thrown by Duncan McMurch, Valentina and Minerva's employer. 25. Minerva was 25. Valentina cringed to think of Gary undressing his 55-year-old dad bod before lithe, slinky Minerva. Did she like hairy paunches? Maybe he only stripped with the lights out. Or his wallet blinded Minerva to Gary's obvious middle age. But surely Minerva realized that as he'd abandoned his job as head of legal and local government without notice, his standard of living was on the cusp of a spectacular nosedive. At least half of everything he'd owned with Valentina was Valentina's, like the house in Rosemarkie Bay across the Moray Firth from Inverness on the Black Isle, even the blue SUV in which he'd carried Minerva off to their new life together. It might have been referred to as Gary's car, because Valentina's job came with a company vehicle, but payments had come from their joint account, into which Valentina had contributed most. Valentina had out-earned Gary for most of the 12 years of their marriage. Gary had chosen a particularly shitty way of ending their marriage by having an affair with Valentina's own PA. Then Minerva had texted colleagues to make Valentina's humiliation clear. Bina Singh, who Valentina had always got on with, had let her see the message. As I'm now with Valentina's husband, it's untenable that I continue to assist her. Gary's left his job at the council too, and we're starting over. Valentina hadn't found it easy to hold up her head while colleagues treated her to wide-eyed gazes, some scandalized, some sympathetic. When she'd asked, firmly, to be considered for one of the redundancies on offer, a package had been negotiated, and she'd been able to leave it all behind. Now, Barnaby sat beside her in the big blue train seat, his brown hair sticking up in a cowlick, his face soft and chubby, blessedly unaware of the sleaze and stupidity around his father's absence. It was June 26th, the first day of 7-year-old Barnaby's school summer holidays, and they were on the way to their tiny holiday cottage on the Isle of Skye, as had been planned long before Gary had left in April. It had crossed her mind that Gary and Minerva would be waiting for today, for Valentina and Barnaby to leave, so they could move into the family house, at least until Valentina returned, ready for Barnaby to restart school on August 19th. She smiled. If so, they were in for a nasty shock, as tenants were moving in for the summer on Monday. Oh yes, and Valentina had changed the locks. Things had been crappy between her and Gary since she'd discovered his affair with Minerva the first time, late last year. He'd sworn it was all over, and she'd agreed to try again for Barnaby's sake. Poor Barnaby.
Isn't anyone sitting with us?
Barnaby looked up from a game on Valentina's iPad to regard the empty seats facing theirs, as the public address system began to announce the stations they'd passed through. Bewley, Muir of Ord, Conan Bridge, Dingwall. She turned her attention to him, feeling a rush of love for the way he swung his feet and that one eyebrow lifted higher than the other when he asked questions.
If no one claims them once the train's left the station, we can spread into that space, I expect. You can choose whether to face backwards or forward.
She glanced through the train window at the grey concrete platform and a ScotRail sign under the corrugated pitched roof of the station. Doors closed and the train gave a tiny jolt.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?